Someone is falling hard because your love became the place they finally felt enough, something they never imagined could happen, something that once felt impossible, something they didn't even realize they had been searching for their entire life. You may not always see it, but your presence has been undoing knots in someone's soul that no one else ever cared to look at long enough to untangle. You walked into their life quietly, without trying to save them, without trying to fix them, without demanding they become anything other than what they already were. And without even knowing it, you became oxygen to someone who had been holding their breath for years. They had spent so much time believing they were too much, or not enough, or somehow both at once. Life had convinced them they were hard to love, unpredictable to hold, difficult to understand. They carried the weight of old disappointments like invisible luggage, dragging memories behind them that whispered lies. You are forgettable, you are replaceable, you will never be chosen in the ways you secretly hope for. But then you arrived, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with a kind of steady presence that didn't demand perfection. You didn't ask them to shrink. You didn't ask them to hide. You didn't ask them to act stronger, softer, louder, quieter, smarter, brighter, or smaller. You simply let them be, and for the first time in a long time, they exhaled. Your love became a mirror that reflected truth back at them, truth they had lost sight of, truth that life had buried under heartbreak, failures, mistakes, and self-blame. They saw themselves in your eyes and realized that maybe they weren't broken beyond repair. Maybe they weren't impossible to love. Maybe all along they were just waiting for someone who looked deeper than their wounds, someone who didn't flinch at their fears, someone who didn't run when their voice trembled or their heart hesitated. Someone who didn't punish them for healing slowly. You became that someone. You didn't even try to be, you were simply yourself. And that was enough. More than enough. And now they're falling, not in the reckless, chaotic way they once feared, but in a softer, slower way that feels like the settling of dust after a long storm. It's the kind of falling that feels like finally coming home after years of wandering with no map, no direction, no safe place to rest. They don't want to rush it, but they also can't deny the truth. Your presence has changed something in them. They're starting to believe again. They're starting to hope again. They're starting to imagine a future where love isn't a battlefield but a garden, where things grow, where warmth exists, where tenderness isn't a trick but a reality they can reach out and touch. They never tell you the full story of what your love has done for them. Not because they take you for granted, but because some things are too sacred, too emotional, too overwhelming to put into words. They are afraid that if they tell you how deeply they feel, how much you've healed, how much you've restored, you might think they're exaggerating. But they're not. You've been healing them quietly, steadily, powerfully, through kindness, through patience, through simply showing up. They fall a little more every time you ask how they're really doing, and you wait for the real answer. They fall a little more every time you notice their tone shift and gently ask what's wrong. They fall when you laugh at their jokes, when you understand their silence, when you remember the small details they thought nobody cared about. They fall when you choose them without hesitation, when you show up even when it's inconvenient, when you make space for them in your world without asking them to fight for room. Every act of softness from you hits them like a revelation. This is what love is supposed to feel like. You don't know how powerful your gentleness is. You don't know how deeply your consistency sinks into someone who never had anyone stay long enough to prove that love could be stable. You don't fully realize how healing your voice is to someone who has always been too hard on themselves. But they know. They feel it every day. They feel it in their chest when they think of you, in the relief of their breath when they hear from you. In the quiet excitement that comes from simply knowing you exist in their life. Your love doesn't overwhelm them. It steadies them. For the first time, they're not afraid of being seen. Not by you. You've made them feel enough in ways they never thought they could be. Enough when they're strong, enough when they're tired, enough when they're joyful, enough when they're vulnerable. You've shown them that love doesn't require flawless skin, flawless words, flawless reactions, or flawless history. Love can hold imperfections and still feel whole, and because of that, because you have loved them in a way that feels like truth, they are falling. Hard. But it's the safest fall they've ever known. Sometimes they lie awake thinking about what their life looked like before you came. They remember the loneliness that felt like a second skin. They remember the nights spent trying to convince themselves that they weren't unlovable. They remember settling for people who only loved them halfway. They remember the way they kept their guard up like a fortress because the world taught them to protect themselves more than it taught them to trust. And then they think about you, the way you knocked on the door of their heart without trying to break it down. The way you held space for them instead of demanding they surrender. The way you didn't rush their healing but walked beside them without keeping score. Do you know what that does to a person? It builds them from the inside out. It teaches them to breathe again. It teaches them to hope again. It teaches them to believe that maybe they deserve things they once pushed away in fear: connection, softness, loyalty, commitment, honesty, peace. You've given them permission to want things again, things they convinced themselves were unrealistic or dangerous to desire. Your love feels like sunrise breaking after a long stretch of night. Not dramatic. Not loud. Not sudden. Just steady light filling places darkness once lived in. They're falling for the way your soul feels like familiarity, like something they've known in another lifetime. They're falling for the way your energy brings calm into rooms that used to feel overwhelming. They're falling for your laugh, for your worries, for your dreams, for the parts of you you try to hide, for the vulnerabilities you didn't think mattered. They're falling because you've shown them that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. That love doesn't have to be loud to be strong. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be enough. You don't realize this, but they replay your words. over and over. The way you tell them they matter. The way you reassure them without being asked. The way you say their name like it holds meaning. The way you talk about the future and include them without hesitation. Those things stay with them longer than you know. Long after the conversation ends, long after the call disconnects, long after the day is over, they carry you with them. Your love has given them a reason to try again. To heal faster. To forgive deeper. To dream louder. To believe in something they had quietly buried. They are becoming a better version of themselves not because you ask them to change, but because being loved by you makes them want to grow. You make them feel like life is bigger than their fears. You make them feel like their heart isn't a battlefield anymore but a garden they can tend without being afraid someone will ruin it. They fall every time they realize you don't see them as a burden. They fall every time you treat their heart with gentleness. They fall every time you choose honesty instead of games. They fall every time your presence makes the noise of the world fade into background static. They fall every time they imagine a future where your hands still find theirs, where your voice still steadies them, where your love continues to be the safe place it already is. You don't know how rare that is. You don't know how loudly their soul responds to the softness you give them. You don't know how deeply your existence has changed their internal world, and maybe you don't need to know. Just understand this. Someone is falling hard because you loved them when they weren't sure they deserved to be loved at all. You didn't rescue them. You didn't fix them. You simply loved them, steadily, honestly, warmly, and that was enough to rebuild something inside them they thought was gone forever. They are falling because your love teaches them, every day, that they are enough. They are falling in ways they never expected, not because everything is perfect, but because with you, even the imperfect moments feel safe. Before you, they measured themselves constantly, wondering if they were doing too much, feeling too deeply, asking for too little or asking for too much. Every connection they had in the past came with a subtle pressure to perform, to adjust, to bend themselves into shapes that hurt. They learned to silence parts of themselves just to fit into spaces that were never built for them. But with you, they don't have to shrink or pretend. They don't have to walk on emotional eggshells. You make them feel like they can unlearn every survival habit they've carried into love. That's why they breathe differently around you. Slowly. Freely. Fully. There is something about the way you look at them that makes the loudest parts of their insecurities quiet down. Something about the way you speak to them that feels like you're tending to the parts of them that the world left unattended. Something about the way you understand their smallest emotions that makes them feel seen in ways they thought were impossible. They've spent years feeling like they were speaking a language no one understood, until you answered back in the same dialect of wounded hope and quiet longing. You didn't meet them at their best. You met them somewhere between survival and self-abandonment. Somewhere between strength and exhaustion, somewhere between fear and desire. And still, You chose them, not for how polished they were, but for how human they were. That kind of acceptance softens a person. They're falling for the way you make space for their emotions, even the messy ones. You don't shame them for being sensitive. You don't judge them for their fears. You don't walk away when their voice cracks or their past shadows show up unexpectedly. You stay. You listen. You hold them with your presence. And though you may think it's nothing, to them it's everything. It's teaching them to stop apologizing for having a heart. It's teaching them that vulnerability doesn't have to lead to abandonment. It's teaching them that they can let someone in without losing themselves. You have become a soft landing in a world that has been harsh to them. And they're falling because that softness is something they never knew how to trust before you. They used to believe softness was a trap. That warmth was temporary. That affection had expiration dates. That love always came with conditions. But you, without trying, without knowing, have been rewriting every story they told themselves about love. When you speak to them, they feel the kind of safety that they once thought only existed in fiction. The kind of safety that makes their mind stop cycling through every worst-case scenario. The kind of safety that makes them willing to open doors inside themselves that they previously nailed shut. You don't force those doors open, you just wait patiently on the other side, reminding them with your presence that it's okay to let someone see the rooms that still need cleaning, the corners they still haven't figured out, the memories they still haven't sorted. You're not in love with their potential. You're in love with their now, and that is why they're falling. They fall in the quiet moments, too, the moments you might not even realize matter. The way you check on them without them having to ask. The way you remember the little things they mention in passing. The way you laugh at their silliness instead of dismissing it. The way you tell them they deserve rest, not just productivity. The way you speak to them with gentleness even when you're frustrated or tired. The way you apologize with sincerity, not ego. The way you reconnect after misunderstandings without letting silence grow into distance. They fall because you treat them with emotional maturity. You treat them with empathy. You treat them like a person worth understanding instead of a puzzle to be solved. Your love doesn't feel like a demand, it feels like a freedom they never knew existed. Freedom to feel. Freedom to be imperfect. Freedom to be human. You may not know it, but your consistency is healing the places in them where inconsistency once caused damage. Your loyalty is calming the parts of them that were conditioned to expect abandonment. Your softness is nurturing the parts of them that were told to harden. Your presence is restoring the pieces of their self-worth that were chipped away by people who never saw their soul clearly. They fall a little more every time you show them that love can be steady without being boring, peaceful without being cold, deep without being overwhelming, passionate without being chaotic. They fall because your love is teaching them balance, something they never had before, and deep down, they're terrified in the most beautiful way. Terrified because loving you feels like opening their eyes after living in the dark. Terrified because they know losing you would feel like losing oxygen. Terrified because they're giving their heart to someone who actually deserves it this time. They're not afraid of you, they're afraid of how much they feel for you. But that fear is wrapped in excitement, wrapped in hope, wrapped in a kind of gratitude they're still learning how to express. Your love has awakened something in them that was dormant, an ability to imagine a life that doesn't revolve around survival but around connection. You've made them believe in partnership instead of loneliness. You've made them believe in effort that doesn't feel heavy. You've made them believe in morning texts that mean something and conversations that don't disappear at midnight. You've made them believe that someone can choose them on their worst days. Not just their brightest ones. They fall for the way you soften when you talk about your dreams. They fall for the way your voice changes when you're sleepy. They fall for the way your eyes hold a quiet tenderness you don't even realize you give away. They fall for your flaws, not because they're romanticized, but because you own them with honesty. You don't pretend to be perfect, you just try. And that effort alone is a language their heart understands deeply. They're falling because your love doesn't take from them, it adds to them. You don't overpower their identity, you complement it. You don't silence their voice, you amplify it. You don't close their world, you expand it. And the most beautiful part? You love them in a way that feels like truth. Not fantasy. Not illusion. Not temporary. Truth. Real, grounding, soul-softening truth. They are falling because with you, they finally feel like enough, not almost enough, not barely enough, not conditionally enough. Simply enough. Here is the final part, written with the same emotional depth, same poetic flow, same inspirational tone, a soft, powerful conclusion that feels complete and whole. They don't tell you this often, maybe because they're scared to overwhelm you, maybe because they're still learning how to express the size of their heart, but you have changed the way they exist in the world. Before you, their love was cautious, measured in small pieces, given with hesitations, protected behind walls they built with years of disappointment. They once believed vulnerability was a luxury they couldn't afford, something too dangerous to hand over to anyone. But your presence, your warmth, your steady love has softened places inside them they thought were permanently hardened. They've begun to trust again, not because they're naive, but because you've earned it in ways no one ever did before. And they're falling for the quiet ways you care, the invisible ways you show up, the unspoken ways you understand them. You think you just love them normally, but to them, your normal feels like a miracle, one they never expected to experience in this lifetime. It's the way you don't rush their healing. The way you don't force transformation. The way you let them unfold naturally, in their own time, in their own rhythm. They've never known a love that let them be slow. They've never known a love that didn't demand progress on command. But you, with your gentle presence and honest heart, have shown them that healing isn't a race, that love isn't a performance, that connection isn't a currency to earn but a space to grow in. Every time you hold space for them, they fall deeper. Every time you choose understanding over judgment, they fall further. Every time you reassure them with actions instead of empty words, something inside them expands: hope, trust, belief, desire. You don't just make them feel loved, you make them feel safe enough to love back with their whole heart. And you need to know this: you didn't just become a person they care about. You became the home they didn't know their heart was waiting for. Not a physical place, not a location, but a feeling: warmth, belonging, ease. The kind of home where they're not afraid to open every drawer, every memory, every wound, because your presence feels like it can hold it all without breaking. They're falling because your love feels like sanctuary. You've allowed them to speak their truth without fear. You've allowed them to cry without shame. You've allowed them to dream without limits. You've allowed them to feel deeply without being told they're too much. You've allowed them to be human, fully, loudly, quietly, honestly. And in a world that has tried to turn them into stone, your love made them remember they still have a pulse. They're falling because you saw their softness and didn't take advantage of it. You saw their fears and didn't run from them. You saw their past and didn't weaponize it. You saw their flaws and didn't treat them as conditions. You loved them with an open heart. Not a scorecard. That kind of love is rare, and they're falling for the rare way you look at them, like they are both a masterpiece and a work in progress, worthy in every phase, valuable in every version, deserving even when they feel undeserving. You may not realize this, but you've become one of the most important stories in their life. A story they never want to stop writing. A story that doesn't need drama to feel powerful or chaos to feel intense. A story built on laughter, trust, vulnerability, effort, presence, and genuine connection. They're falling because your love speaks the language their soul always understood but never received, and the truth is simple. So simple it might scare you. You are loved deeper than you think. You are appreciated more than you realize. You are needed in ways they struggle to put into words. You are enough in every way they once believed they weren't. You are the softness that returned them to themselves. You are the warmth that melted their hesitation. You are the reason they believe in the possibility of forever again. They are falling hard, because your love didn't demand they become someone else. It allowed them to become who they always were underneath the hurt. And when someone finds that kind of love, they don't just fall. They bloom. You became the place where they finally felt enough, and because of that, their heart is choosing you, fully, quietly, powerfully, every single day.